Your mind is already inventing excuses to click away from this video. That internal nudge, that sudden feeling of, I already know this, or this isn't for me. That's a subtle but powerful defense mechanism. The legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung wasn't just observing neuroses, he was dissecting the human soul's deep resistance to its own liberation. He discovered there are fundamental, unavoidable truths about spiritual awakening that your ego desperately wants to hide from you. These truths aren't dark or negative, they are in fact profoundly illuminating. But they demand a fundamental change in your entire approach to the spiritual journey. And that is precisely why the ego, the small habitual center of your personality, fights back. Understanding these revelations would dismantle the ego's comfortable narrative, threatening its perceived control. Jung called this internal pushback psychological resistance. He believed that what we resist knowing about our own awakening is exactly the key to accelerating our transformation. The greater the internal friction, the more potent the revelation. Today we're sharing the 5 spiritual awakening revelations from Jung that you'll instinctively want to skip, dismiss, or argue against. But you absolutely shouldn't. Your very impulse to resist is the proof that you need to hear them now. Because Jung showed us that the psyche protects itself fiercely from any truth that requires a fundamental shift in identity. Every revelation we're about to explore will trigger that familiar psychological resistance. Your mind generating reasons to stop watching, to disengage, or to pretend this doesn't apply to you. Remember this: that resistance is your ego's defense against true transformation. The stronger you feel it, the more essential it is that you stay and listen. This is the uncomfortable truth that prevents most people from ever genuinely beginning their journey. Jung discovered that a significant portion of what is framed as spiritual seeking is actually a highly sophisticated form of avoidance. You are not pursuing profound awakening. You are often fleeing the difficult, messy, and necessary work of simply being human. Jung coined the term spiritual escapism for this phenomenon. It manifests in various ways. The endless pursuit of the next teaching
feels meaningless and you're afraid to change paths. You focus instead on achieving enlightenment, a lofty goal that conveniently sidesteps the practical, frightening need to find meaningful work. Personal struggles, when everyday problems, financial stability, health, difficult conversations feel overwhelming, the seeker shifts focus to cosmic consciousness, dismissing the mundane as beneath their spiritual notice. Jung's core insight was this: individuation happens through life, not despite it. Every avoided human challenge is a missed, crucial opportunity for genuine transformation. The very experiences you try to bypass are the raw material for your spiritual growth. This avoidance often takes the form of spiritual bypassing, a term later popularized by psychologist John Wellwood, building directly on Jungian principles. This is the use of spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or suppress unresolved emotional wounds, psychological needs, and developmental tasks. Examples of spiritual bypassing. You can meditate for hours, claiming oneness, but immediately avoid a necessary, difficult conversation with your partner or family member. You read vast libraries of texts on compassion, but struggle to maintain ordinary, reciprocal friendships. You preach about unconditional love while simultaneously refusing to develop a healthy, functional ego that can set boundaries and navigate the complexities of daily life. What makes this insidious is that it feels noble. Seeking enlightenment seems more important than dealing with a tax return or a difficult boss. The pursuit of transcendence appears more spiritual than dealing with ordinary human conflict. But Jung discovered that this is fundamentally backward. True spiritual development is the conscious, fully engaged encounter with life's challenges, not the evasion of them.
Jung identified the spiritualization defense, using spiritual concepts to entirely avoid psychological work. Anger. Instead of facing your suppressed anger and understanding its source, you bypass it with forced, surface-level compassion, pretending it doesn't exist. Selfishness. You reframe genuine selfishness or lack of accountability as self-care or protecting my energy, refusing to acknowledge the impact on others. Relationships. Rather than addressing the specific dynamic,
You hate your job. Conscious suffering means facing that reality and either transforming your experience of the job or consciously choosing to leave it, not retreating into spiritual solitude. It means dealing with financial responsibilities, recognizing them as an important aspect of grounding, rather than dismissing them as unspiritual or materialistic. It means engaging fully in your relationships, recognizing that conflict is a crucible for consciousness, rather than dissolving your connections in search of a perfect transcendent state. The core truth is that life itself is the path. Every challenge is a teacher. Every mundane responsibility is a practice. The mystic who cannot maintain an ordinary job or a healthy relationship is not enlightened. They are merely avoiding the very human experiences that would forge genuine, integrated transformation. The shift isn't about abandoning practice, it's about grounding it. Meditation is preparation for conscious daily life, not an escape from it. Spiritual insights must be tested and proven true in the friction of relationships and the demands of work. The spiritual and the material must unite. Even after overcoming spiritual escapism, there's another resistance point: the truth that you are not a passive victim of your life's circumstances. Jung's most confronting observation was this: most of your suffering is not happening to you. You are actively creating it through unconscious patterns, self-sabotage, and resistance to reality. This is not about blame, but about recognizing your terrifying and immensely powerful capacity to generate, and therefore to stop generating, unnecessary pain. Your ego doesn't want you to know this, because admitting it means the end of the victim narrative and the beginning of absolute responsibility for your experience. Through decades of clinical work, Jung observed that people unconsciously but consistently create the very suffering they claim they want to escape. They repeatedly choose partners who trigger their deepest wounds. They subconsciously create situations that confirm their worst fears about themselves. They cling to patterns that perpetuate their pain, calling it fate or bad luck. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you constantly initiates conflict, creates drama, or feels compelled to fix others, thus ensuring a constant state of chaos. Sabotaging success. You get close to a promotion, financial stability, or a healthy commitment, and then, at the crucial moment, you subconsciously self-sabotage, confirming your inner belief that you don't deserve it or aren't ready for it. The difficulty in accepting this truth lies in how external suffering feels. The difficult person seems to be the cause of your stress. The challenging situation appears to be the source of your struggle. But Jung's profound insight was that we unconsciously seek out and create circumstances that perfectly match our internal, unintegrated state. The outer world is merely reflecting the inner condition. Jung detailed specific mechanisms that create this internal suffering. Projection. You refuse to see a disowned quality, say arrogance or neediness, in yourself, so your mind projects it onto others, making you constantly encounter people who embody that trait. The resulting conflict is not external. It's an internal war waged outward. Shadow denial. You deny your own shadow, the dark, unaccepted aspects of yourself.
As a result, you attract people who embody these rejected aspects, forcing you into relationships that become painful mirrors, confronting you with the parts you disowned years ago. Childhood patterns. Unconscious emotional patterns and survival strategies learned in childhood are mindlessly recreated in adult life. Not as punishment, but as a misguided, desperate attempt to finally resolve the original wounding. This revelation is existentially threatening because it removes the comfort of victimhood. If you are creating your own suffering, you can no longer blame your parents, your boss, the economy, or fate. This immense responsibility feels overwhelming to the ego, which prefers to maintain the illusion of external causation. If I'm the victim, I don't have to change. But for Jung, this truth is the ultimate empowerment. If you are creating your suffering, you are the only one who can stop creating it. The key: taking back projections. The path to change is to take back your projections. When someone infuriates you with their arrogance, ask, where does that same
Searching, meditating, and practicing, a powerful part of you is actively resisting and preventing your own awakening. Jung called this the ego's investment in sleep. He insisted that recognizing this deep-seated, subtle resistance is essential for any genuine transformation to occur. The ego knows precisely what genuine awakening entails: its own dethronement. Awakening means the ego will no longer be the primary center of your psychological universe. Its habitual fears will cease to control your choices. Its transient desires will no longer drive your life's direction. It will be relativized, put into its proper, functional place, rather than remaining the master. Therefore, while your conscious mind desperately seeks freedom, your ego subconsciously sabotages it through subtle, highly effective means. As Jung noted, the seeker who cannot find is often the one who doesn't truly want to find. The ego is terrified of awakening, so it constructs an elaborate system of endless seeking that ensures arrival is perpetually delayed. This resistance manifests in ingenious, self-deceptive ways. Non-integrated methods. You pursue awakening through methods that guarantee you won't achieve it. Intellectual study without any practical application, or superficial practice without deep, integrated transformation. Confirmation bias. You gravitate toward teachers, books, and communities that confirm your existing beliefs and comfort zones, rather than those who challenge your structure and force you to grow. The almost but not quite pattern. This is the most telling sign. You meditate deeply, but stop just before the breakthrough state. You engage in shadow work, but pull back precisely when the really difficult, painful material surfaces. You approach ego death, but your ego executes a brilliant, last-minute maneuver to save itself. This is not failure. It is the ego's successful defense. Jung identified this comfortable, perpetual state as comfortable seeking. Maintaining just enough spiritual practice
forces you to question your entire spiritual identity. Your ego wants you to skip this because it reveals that your years of searching might have been a highly structured, self-imposed prison. A narrative designed to protect the very structure you claim you want to transcend. Jung noted that people often spend decades in what he termed preparatory circling, always preparing for transformation, but never transforming. Just one more book, one more retreat, one more practice. The preparation never ends because the ego ensures you never feel quite prepared enough to take the terrifying leap. The key: conscious acknowledgement. The path out of this is not to violently overthrow the resistance, but to consciously acknowledge and accept it. Yes, a part of me is afraid of the responsibility that comes with being awake. Yes, a part of me prefers the comfort of seeking to the stark reality of finding. This acknowledgement is not failure, it is profound honesty. When you recognize the resistance, you can finally work with it, rather than being unconsciously controlled by its endless sabotage. This revelation directly challenges the currency of modern spirituality. For many seekers, the ultimate markers of progress are those dramatic peak experiences, the visions, the mystical states, the moments of felt unity consciousness, the ego dissolution. Jung discovered that this over-reliance on the ecstatic state is another form of subtle avoidance. He called this the inflation of the numinous, overvaluing the spiritual experience itself, while tragically undervaluing the difficult, unglamorous integration work that actually creates transformation. Jung's clinical work showed that people could have profound, life-altering experiences, visions, prophetic dreams, encounters with the self, and then return to their ordinary lives fundamentally unchanged. He emphasized that these experiences are merely openings or invitations. They are not achievements. What matters is not the experience itself, but what you do with it. The numinous experience is merely the beginning, not the end, Jung wrote. What matters is the long, difficult work of integrating what was revealed. Most people have the experience, collect it like a trophy and stop there, believing the experience was the transformation. This leads to the spiritual
The void was more complete, as if awakening were measured in mystical moments instead of embodied wisdom. Focusing exclusively on the high actively prevents integration. While you are busy seeking the next transcendent state, you are neglecting the integration of the last insight. While you are comparing notes, you are not embodying the wisdom in a challenging conversation. The revelation that your profound spiritual experiences mean less than you think is a profound threat, because these moments often form the proof of your spiritual specialness. To recognize them as merely a doorway, not the journey itself, deflates the ego's spiritual inflation and forces you to confront the challenging work of the ordinary. Integration, the true work. Jung was clear: what transforms you is not the experience, but the integration. That moment of unity consciousness is meaningless if you return to separation, judgment, and emotional reactivity in your daily life immediately afterward. That moment of divine, unconditional love is empty if you cannot love your ordinary, flawed human partner, child, or colleague. That vision of the perfect path is worthless if you don't take the first, difficult step. Integration is unglamorous work. It means changing actual behavior, not just having beautiful insights. It means embodying wisdom in the most challenging, mundane situations, not just when you are on retreat. It means living differently, not just experiencing differently. The key shift is recognizing experience as doorway, not destination. The experience opens the door of perception. You still have to walk through it and live in the new reality every single day. Jung's final, most radical and liberating revelation is this: you are not actually searching for awakening. You are maintaining the pretense of sleep. Deep down, beneath all the noise of seeking, striving, and struggling, you already know who you are. You are already conscious. You are already whole. But you are profoundly invested in pretending otherwise, because to the ego, being asleep
feels infinitely safer than taking on the overwhelming responsibility of being awake. The tragedy of individuation. Jung discovered that what we validation from a guru, a book, or a video, rather than trusting your own inner knowing. The wait for it. You wait for the moment of awakening or the final shift when you are already awake, but simply pretending not to notice the subtle, simple consciousness that is already present. The manufacturing of complexity. You create elaborate spiritual philosophies that obscure the simple truth, believing that enlightenment must be complex, difficult, and distant. Otherwise, your years of seeking would be invalidated. This revelation is the ultimate threat to the ego, because it invalidates the entire seeking project. If you are already whole and awake, then all the searching, the suffering, the money spent, and the time invested has been, in a sense, unnecessary. This simple, crushing truth is why the ego creates such elaborate arguments against it. The ego's greatest terror is the terror of responsibility. If you are already awake, you are instantly responsible for living from that place of wholeness. You can no longer hide behind seeking as an excuse for inaction. You can no longer postpone with preparation. I'll start living when I'm enlightened. You can no longer avoid reality with the excuse of ignorance or unconsciousness. This responsibility feels immense, so the ego, in a final act of self-preservation, maintains the cozy illusion of sleep, the process of admitting what you know. Jung's approach was not to force recognition, but to gently point toward what is already known. He understood that people wake from pretend sleep when they are finally ready to handle the responsibility of being awake. The entire individuation journey, the process of becoming whole, is in reality just the process of admitting what you have always known. The revelation that you are already awake but pretending to sleep removes all final excuses. No more seeking to hide behind. No more ignorance to claim. No more unconsciousness to blame. Just the simple, terrifying, and utterly liberating truth that you already are what you seek. Conclusion. The courage of productive discomfort. Jung's 5 truths you wanted to skip. You're using spirituality to avoid life. Your suffering is mostly self-created. You don't actually want to awaken. Your spiritual experiences mean less than you think.
Resist reveals precisely where we need to grow. The fear you feel is the map to your greatest growth opportunity. Acknowledgement without judgment. The invitation here is not to violently overthrow your defenses, but to gently acknowledge them. The avoidance, the resistance, and the pretense all served a purpose. They protected you when you were not ready. Now you can simply acknowledge, yes, I use spirituality to avoid messy human conflict. Yes, I unconsciously recreate situations that cause me pain. Yes, a part of me resists the finality of being truly awake. Yes, I have overvalued my peak experiences. Yes, I continue to pretend I do not know who I am. This acknowledgement, made without judgment, is the beginning of real transformation. It takes immense courage to accept oneself completely. The avoidance, the self-creation, the resistance, and the glorious, terrifying potential of the self. If you made it through all 5 revelations, if you listened despite the resistance, you have already demonstrated the courage Jung believed was essential for genuine integrated awakening. The willingness to hear the unwanted truth is the necessary first step toward transformation.